Hello, welcome to episode 5 of I'm Not a Math Person. Today we are going to work on addition and subtraction with all natural numbers. And all natural numbers, if we remember from a previous episode, all natural numbers are our positive numbers and our negative numbers. And I'm going to try to keep it simple as what I'm doing with all the episodes, and we're only going to focus on numbers like 2 and 1, so we can get the basic idea of what we are doing when we add two negative numbers, or if we add a negative number with a positive number, or if we subtract a negative number from a positive number, or a positive number from a negative number. And then there is the next one, which is a little bit more complicated. If we take a negative number and we subtract it with another negative number, what does that mean? And what are the operations? And what I will also do is try to put it in a real world application such as temperature. So we all have experience with temperature, and hopefully by applying addition and subtraction with all integers, hopefully associating that with temperature, it'll make more sense for you. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so I'm only gonna do a very slight review, not necessarily a review, but just a repetition of some of the ideas of what we've already gone over from episode 2, 3, 1, and 4. So first things first, we will use natural numbers, but we will use more than natural numbers. And if we remember what natural numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the way to infinity. And now what we will also incorporate in addition and subtraction here are all integers. And all integers, if we remember from the previous episode and the first episode, all integers are going to be your negative infinity all the way to -4, -3, -1, 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the way to infinity. So now, when we work on these with addition and subtraction with our negative numbers and our positive numbers, when we add all of our positive numbers, which are natural numbers, which are also integers, it's going to be the same as what we've done before in episode 1, including subtraction. And when we look at our negative numbers and we add them and subtract them together, it's gonna have the same formula, or you will think about it, you will work them the same way as you do with natural numbers until you add and subtract a negative number with a positive number, or a positive number with a negative number. So for example, let's do an easy one, which is, let's take 1 plus 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. Let's take a -1 plus -2. And what does that mean? That's -3. However, though it's the same, you work with them the same way, they have two different meanings. So if we look at 0, 0 is less than 1, 1 is less than 2, and 2 is less than 3. So when we added 2 and 1 together, we got a larger number, 3. But for -1 plus -2 equal to -3, we are going to have a different number, or a different meaning from 3. So 0 is greater than -1, -1 is greater than -2, and -2 is greater than -3. And again, what this means is when we add two positive numbers, we're going to get a larger number. But when we add two negative numbers, we're going to get a smaller number, -3. Now let's look at what happens when we add a positive number with a negative number, or a negative number with a positive number. So let's try negative number first. So if we look at -1 plus 2, what does that equal? Or what are we doing? So this can look a little confusing, especially when you start working with larger numbers. So let's make this easier for us to look at. Let's take it as 2 plus -1. And if that still seems a little confusing of what are you doing, let's try to make it a little bit more easy. So 2 minus 1. All three of these are basically the same thing. They mean the same thing, and the result will be the same answer. -1 plus 2, or 2 plus -1, is the same as 2 minus 1. And when we take 1 away from 2, we get 1. So now, sorry, I don't know why I'm doing this. Anyway, so the next thing what we want to look at is how do we apply this to a real world application? The simplest thing we can do is think about temperature. So in a temperature setting, let's say it's 2 degrees Kelvin. If you're familiar with Kelvin, you know this is pretty cold, very cold. So let's say it's 2 degrees Kelvin, and overnight the temperature fell to, or it didn't fall to, but it fell 3 degrees Kelvin. So in order to find out what temperature it is now, we have to take 2 minus 3. So 2 minus 3 in the past, we couldn't do it with natural numbers because we didn't have negative numbers to work with. But now, since we are working with all integers, that opens up a whole world of new numbers and new possibilities. So let's write this a different way. Or actually, no, we'll keep it this way. So let's take 2 Kelvin, move it here, and then like we did before with breaking our numbers down to make it something that makes sense to us, or to compose and decompose, let's break 3 down to -2 and -1. So since we have a -2 or 2 minus 2, those will cancel each other out, and all that's left is our -1. So now we know the temperature outside is -1 Kelvin, which is extremely cold. Now let's specifically look at the operation, such as addition and subtraction, of two negative numbers, or 2 positive numbers, or a positive and a negative. But we'll only focus on the operation of what we're doing and the whether the number is a negative or a positive. So what I mean by that is, let's say we have a negative a, or a negative some number, minus a positive some number. Another way to write this, -a minus a. So whenever we have a positive number, we don't generally write a plus sign in front of it. Hopefully you noticed that, and previously what I've been doing, even including in when we only worked with natural numbers. But so now let's just look at this operation and this sign, minus and a plus, will become a negative or a minus. So now let's say we have a negative a, or negative some number, plus a negative number. This operation will become a negative. So minus a, negative a minus a. And what we've noticed from here is whenever we have a negative, or sorry, a minus and a positive, or a plus and a negative, they both will become minuses. Now, let's look at something different. So, let's say we have some number, and it doesn't matter what this one is at the moment. So, let's say we have plus a positive a. Since these two are same, or like, plus positive, we still have a positive. So negative a plus a. Now, what happens if we have two negatives? Negative a minus negative a, or negative some number minus negative some number. These two signs, since they both are the same, that will become a positive, or a plus. So that's what I wanted to show with this part, just so we can understand when we have a negative or a minus and a positive, or a addition and a negative, or a positive and a negative, we both will get negatives or minuses. Same thing with this, or on the other end of this, when we have two like signs, a positive and a positive, plus positive, minus and a negative, two minus signs or two negative signs, we will get a positive and we'll get a positive. So the next step will actually show this in the application. Okay, so now let's do something that's a little bit more complicated. We're going to focus on the idea of it, which is why I keep using smaller numbers like 1 and 2. But if we understand the idea, we can apply this to all numbers. So what we are going to do now is subtract two negative numbers. In our third episode, what we did was, when we subtracted two natural numbers or two positive integers, it was relatively simple. When we think of something like 2 minus 1, we know that that equals 1, because we're taking 1 from 2. So, and if we do something like negative 1 plus 2, it's basically the same thing as 2 minus 1, which is 1. But what happens when we do something like negative 2 minus negative 1? Well, what we can do with this, now this is a little bit another step up with mathematics. So in multiplication, when you take negative numbers, a negative will cancel out another negative. In this case, we have, think of this as another negative. So we can do this times this, 2 plus 1, or 1 minus 2. And now, since we have worked with all integers, we worked with our negative numbers, we know that this is also 1 minus 1 minus 1. And these two will cancel each other out, which leaves us with negative 1. If this step didn't really make sense, or it seems like a large leap by throwing in multiplication, don't worry. The next episode I will work on will be with multiplication with natural numbers or positive integers and negative numbers or negative integers, and it'll make more sense. But for now, just keep in mind, if you see -3 or any negative number minus a negative number, maybe 4, these two will become positive. So you have your negative integers with with minus will become positive. And again, in the next episode, that will make more sense. To figure this out, I'll leave that for you. Okay, so the basic idea now is, now that we know if we have two positives or the plus a positive number, we'll have a positive number. If we have a negative and a negative, that's a positive. But if we have a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive, it'll equal a negative sign. To show this, again, let's take -1 minus -2. Now, a negative and a negative will equal a positive. And again, if this looks a little bit tricky for you, let's make sense of it. 2 minus 1. 1. Now, the next step or the next idea is if we have something like, let's say a larger number. I want to go larger with our -1 just so it makes a little bit more sense that it's not always going to be this clean. So if we have something like -3 minus -1, well, then we have -3 plus 1. To make sense of it, 1 minus 3. But this is a little bit more complicated because this number is bigger than that. So 1 minus 3, now we have to dive into all our negative numbers again. So we know 1 is in 3, so let's take -1 and then also -2 by decomposing. 1 will cancel out 1, and that leaves us with -2. So I did that just to show you it's not always going to be easy or straightforward with a -1 will give you a positive number. That's not always going to be the case. Sometimes you will get a negative number. It just depends on which numbers you're working with. But that's the basic idea with addition and subtraction with natural numbers and all integers, which are positive numbers and negative numbers. Okay, so what did we do today? Today we worked with all integers, and with all integers we used negative numbers and positive numbers. The applications we used when working with negative numbers and positive numbers is addition and subtraction. To help make sense of addition and subtraction with negative numbers and positive numbers, we used composing numbers and decomposing numbers. It's an I. Another idea we used is we took some number and we recognized that it was less than another number, and we took another number, recognized that it was greater than another number. Then the final thing we did was when we looked at a number plus another number, we recognize that this will become a negative, or -A minus A. or if we took a negative number minus a negative number, we recognize that these two signs will become a positive, or negative a plus a. And these two are interchangeable. So what do I mean by that? Is if we have a minus a positive a, that will become a minus a. Okay, so that's it for now. I hope this made a little bit more sense with addition and subtraction with all integers. The next video will be on multiplication with positive numbers and negative numbers. And maybe I'll throw in a little bit of division, but again, with everything, I want to just get down the idea of what we are doing and make sense of it. Not necessarily dive into large numbers like 1,000 minus negative 2,000. I just want to get to the point where we understand what we're doing with small numbers. Because if we understand what we are doing with our small numbers, like 1 and 2, or 3 and 4, anywhere between 1 and 10, whether it be negative number or positive number, if we understand the mechanics of it, of what we are doing and how to make sense of it, when we work with larger numbers, it'll be the exact same thing, just large number. So with that, if you have any questions, email me, message me. If you want to leave a comment to address anything maybe I said that maybe it didn't come across well, or maybe it's maybe you just need help with understanding it a little bit better. Maybe I can explain it in a follow-up video in a different way to help bring more light to it. But if not, then great. Thank you for watching. I hope that what I have done today in this episode, that it brought a little bit more understanding for you, and with that understanding, it alleviated some of your math anxiety and made you feel like, in fact, maybe you are a math person.